this is an interim demo. You guys understand there's a lot of things that are work in process, but it's really helpful to see sort of the pieces that are coming into play. Chris and Dave, I know you guys have done a lot of work on the networking pieces for Crowbar, the first pass on this. So I know you guys have a lot of relevant information. Things have changed a bit, but hopefully it'll make sense. And there's some things that are coming together that hopefully you'll like. We'll see. The first thing that's important to realize is Crowbar install stops a lot earlier than it used to. So when you run a Crowbar ISO, you bring up the system to a base operating environment with the web server running. Chef is not installed, DNS is not installed, none of the services that Crowbar needs are installed anymore during the install process. There's actually a configuration step that's necessary. And so what happens is it doesn't even add the admin node. So when you come to the first screen, you're going to have basically an empty database. And the first thing you'll do is you'll want to configure the system, which takes you into this Bootstrap, I always have trouble saying that, Bootstrap screen, where you can go in and modify the different configuration settings. There's a bug on DNS server. These will ultimately all have overlays. I just haven't taken the time to do it. But if you wanted to set your NTP server with external servers, you do it right here, even before you get started. Same thing with the network server role. This is where you change your interface maps. I'll click through some of these in a minute. Basically, this is where if you wanted to use an external Chef server, it's not code that we have working right now, but that's where you would do it. You'd tell it not to deploy the Chef server. This is development text. It's just in development mode, telling me it's using the raw mode instead of a template. And then before I start, I actually need to have, looks like I have a bug with this. All right, this demo is going to be short-lived if I have a bug in creating the admin network. Huh. Challenge of development demos. Let's see. All right, so what I did in the background is I let it go ahead and create. I used the API calls to create the admin network. I don't know why that bug is there. And so from the admin network here, this is basically what you would have gotten by default in the network JSON file. The difference is that this hasn't been deployed yet. So in Crowbar 1, by the time you see any screens, you've actually already done all this deployment work. For Crowbar 2, it doesn't do anything except set up the web server. So you can go in and configure this. And so from the networking side, you can come in and set up the information that you want to set up. You can mess with the ranges and change all these pieces. I had a bug in here when I did the last demo. Good, and it's fixed. So you can go in and change the ranges that you want to use completely, however you want. None of them have been set up yet. It's all waiting. And then from there, if I didn't have an admin node created, it would create it using the web server as the host. And then starting the installation actually kicks off the annealing steps, which is under here. And this is in dev mode, so the annealer, I need to kick it off. This is the thing I was trying to make work right, is actually make the annealer. Yeah, there you go. Run the delay jobs in the background. So the annealer is the engine that does all the work. So basically in Crowbar 2, all of the activity that's necessary to execute the system is decomposed into atomic units called node roles, which are literally apply this one role to this one node, and then there's a directed graph that determines which ones go in what order. And it's a concretely defined thing. It's very specific. And that relationship, those relationships, which is what's going on right now, the annealer's running through these relationships and processing, determine what is done in what order. So it's transitioning an activity. There's things that are pending that could be done, they're to do, and then there's things that are blocked because earlier activities have to happen. In the simulator, all these things just they don't do any work, they just have time delays. And so they need to process it. Some of the stuff in here, like the network server, where we're actually making network configurations, I haven't baked in all of the simulation actions, so I think it's going to get hung right here, waiting for it to move on. I have to figure out why that's blocking it. And then what you'll see from there is that means that we've got this system deployment, and then in system deployment you can actually watch the activity that's going on. So one of the big differences for Crowbar 2 is that all these node roles are very specific. Everything we do, we can actually go in and see exactly what's going on in the system on which nodes, and if there's a problem, what's getting hung up. And from there we can go and edit it, make changes. The networking ones are special, and it is going to get hung because I have encoded a way for the non-production system to handle that activity. The bus interface maps, this is actually database driven, not configuration driven, or not JSON driven. So those are coming out of the database, and there's screens for managing that, just like there's screens for managing the networks. And then I can add, if I wanted to add a new network like public, I don't care what it's called. So when I add that network, I can come in and make configurations, and all these things get driven to the database. And if you're in dev mode, you can jump in and actually check out we have scaffolding, so you can look at the base objects, and IP allocation and things like that. One of the things that's really cool about this is that we're actually using, and Victor wrote a really good email sort of describing some of this mechanism. I'm really showing the UI. What's happening under the scenes is that every node role and every role has through roles you can subclass, and there's events that get tied into this. And so when you take the network admin, let me actually walk through this because it's really useful to explain. It's going to take a couple times to explain it, probably all the way. This network admin, this is the admin network for the system, and every node is automatically added into it because the network admin role is a discovery role. It's also used for bootstrapping, so you actually can see some of those capabilities in here. So it's going to be automatically added, and as soon as I propose a node role to join the network admin, which is the way you associate a role and a node, it calls an event, and that event is processed by the network bar clamp, and it assigns an IP address from the available network that you asked. So the network admin has an allocation of IP addresses, and there's an event code that actually does that IP allocation for you as soon as that role is allocated, and then those get pushed down into the system by the annealer framework when it runs these roles. And that's exactly what's happening here. Is that the code that does this transition for this node role is not doesn't work in the simulator. I'm going to come back to actually I'll show you. And then if I wanted to add new capability, for example, I could add there's a whole bunch of test roles that are in the system. So this is a new service. This could be something like Nova, it'd be like Nova Controller, Nova Compute, things like that. These don't have dependencies on them. If they did, they would also you'd also add in the dependencies, so that by adding one role, you could actually add in 20 roles if they're all prerequisites. It would there's a flag that lets those things come in automatically, and if they're there, it just uses them. And then so I can add a role. I can add this node into this deployment. Yeah, that's right. This was working before and we've shown it, but it looks like I'm creating an error. All right. Oh, yeah, of course. Sorry. This is a committed snapshot, and I should turn off drag and drop for that. You're not allowed to make changes in a committed snapshot. You can only make changes in a proposed snapshot. So if I go back to my deployment list and I look at my dev, in this case, this is a proposed snapshot. I can create a role here, and then I can assign a node to it. and in this case that node is proposed, and then I could edit information about that proposal. If the node is not in proposed state, you're not allowed to edit it. Part of the workflow engine for the Crowbar infrastructure is users can only edit things that are in proposed mode. Once you commit the proposal, then the system has it, it's annealing it, and so it's in a transition state, and it's going to anneal it until it gets into active state, and at which point you could then create a new proposal from the active state. Some of that sounds very Crowbar 1-esque, and that's on purpose. We tried to preserve that. And one of the changes we're about to make in this next sprint is we're actually going to enable multiple deployments. System deployments is a special case where nodes get discovered, and you won't be able to do any editing against it because it'll never go back to a proposed state.
So, Rob, I have a question. In Crowbar 1, we get in a state that if a proposal is running and it gets stuck, there's nothing you can do with it. You have to go into Chef and blow it away because you can't edit it. Is there an escape hatch in Crowbar 2 for a hung proposal? Definitely.
There's an interrupt. So you can actually interrupt and push it back. So I haven't shown you this screen yet. So in this screen, it brings in all of, it looks more exciting in a production system because there's only 2 roles, 2 bar clamps that are active in a test system. This is actually every bar clamp, and it shows you all of the roles that are active and what state they're in. So you can actually, when Victor's testing, he has like 10 columns here, and you can actually watch the whole infrastructure transition across different bar clamps. It's really cool to watch. But what would happen is if it got stuck, these would turn red. And let me see if I can do that in this deployment. I'll use this one. Yeah. For testing purposes, there's a role called test fails that always fails. And then let me commit that. And these are now to do. If the annealer's running in the background, then it should actually create that problem. And then if it fails, if it's in failed state, you can actually reapply it and try and right from the UI, just take another bite at the apple. Or you can go back and interrupt it, and that will move it. That will basically take all of the pending node roles and push them back into proposed. It creates a new snapshot, actually. It pushes them back into proposed, and then you can fix whatever you want and reapply it.
Does that answer your question, Chris?
It was Dave, and I think so.
Sorry.
So basically, that's okay. And basically, what you're saying is, in any state, you can hit interrupt, and it will stop.
Right.
Is that true?
That's true.
Okay.
It won't stop the things that are in transition because the jig controls those, but it will stop the things that are to do and blocked.
Okay, so this is a problem in Crowbar 1, though, right? Is that we get into a place where it's applying and stays in applying forever, and you can't do anything to it through Crowbar.
Right, and that'll be very different.
We could still get that same state.
It'll be very different because what that state means is that there's stuff that we've pushed over to Chef, and Chef is just running on. It's a really reasonable concern. We only send the information to Chef when it's ready for it. We don't batch a whole bunch of work to Chef anymore. So the idea that you would have all things that are in flight in Chef, where you have this big blob of stuff that has to be worked on, we really tried to stop that. And what we want is give Chef the information that it needs to be aware of with the scope of information that it needs to act, which is what attribute injection does. And then when it comes back and says, I'm ready for the next thing, give it the next thing. That's the whole infrastructure, this whole screen with the annealer. That's exactly what it's showing you. What it's saying in the screen is, there's one thing that's busted. There's one thing that we're waiting for Chef to finish on. There's one thing that's in to do that's going to be sent to Chef next. And then we have this work that Chef doesn't even know about because it hasn't happened. And the reality is, I keep saying chef, but it doesn't. You might have actions that don't use chef at all. They could be done via SSH session using the script jig. They could be no op actions. And so when you look at the jigs that do work, in this case, system's getting bogged down a little bit. Okay. Oops, where'd it go? So, all right, so what happens, so there's a couple of jigs here, and the test jig is just for running local machines where you don't want it to take any action. No-op is used for things like networks that they're placeholders, they're not directly implemented. There's things about networks that aren't directly implemented, so they have no-op as a target. Chef, if I turn on the chef jig, then the thing that turns on the chef jig is installing chef, and the script jig is the thing that does that. So what you'll see is the script jig is the thing that actually installs chef. So in a normal bootstrapping model, when you bring up the admin node, what it's going to do is it's going to use the script jig to install the chef server, and then it'll block until that's complete. And then once the chef server is installed, it'll start sending all the bring up instructions for all the other services through the chef interface in the annealer. So we literally are using Crowbar to bootstrap Crowbar from that perspective. Unlike last time where we did all this chef and bootstrapping magic in the install script, in this case we're actually doing the legitimate deployment of Crowbar from Crowbar. That's what makes the installs a lot more fun to watch, because you'll be able to go into the annealer view here and watch the install, the bootstrapping install work, or you can do it from the snapshot view over here, where you'd see all the different bar clamps that are enabled, and you'd see them go through their transitions. Same is true as you go through booting and discovering a node. You'd be able to see each concrete step that node goes through in transition, BIOS, RAID, all those things that today in Crowbar 1 are completely opaque. You will see them as specific node roles that get applied individually in that case. I'm belaboring that point, but it's really important to sort of understand how that's working. And then if I come in here with my failed node role, I can come in, this is the actual, I can see it. And then down here, this is part of what you were asking about. This is the log that, test ones don't have much log, but they actually produce a reasonable log that shows you what's going on. In a chef or a script jig, you actually get the real output from the run in this log capture area. And then if you think you've addressed it, or it was just timing, you can push retry. Node goes back to do, and then the annealer is going to pick it back up. So here's to do, and the annealer is going to come in and figure out what it needs to do. Right, that is this guy. There's a way to turn this off when it's in propose, but for now it's going to just keep failing, which is useful for testing. Let's see. So that I've shown that. So the big things that were added from the UI perspective were the networks interfaces and the bootstrapping pieces. A lot of these other things have been there. And one of the things that's coming is let's see. So this screen here is pretty cool. It shows you a simple grid with the bar clamps and the nodes. We're working on this layer cake view that'll put the node roles based on function. So you'll get basically the same lights showing you progress, but it will be grouped by what the actual use of that is. So you'd be able to watch a deployment sort of light up as we built up capabilities within the system. There's a view like this in the OpenStack deployments. Most people don't realize it's there because it's only in the Dell pieces. But this will be part of the underlying system. I might need to tone down the colors. But other than that, those are the new features that surfaced. All this stuff is pretty standard. Oh, that was the other thing that surfaced. Power state. So the nodes now have this concept of on-off, which turns out to be really important because if a node is off, it blocks node roles, and so that's been important. And then we added the additional concept of available or not. So this allows you to manually intervene so that a node role, I'm going to fix that graphic. So a node role does not get work if you don't want it to. So it'll effectively work should be able to flow around if it's not a dependency. But if that node is marked as reserved, we will not force actions on it. Pretty typical use case. It's frankly a more advanced use case than we would normally take on, except that it was so easy to add in. We know it's a use case that we want, and it was really easy to add in. So you'll have a reserve flag and it'll just show green if it's on and reserved, or dark if it's off and reserved with the red bar. And then it shows you text also. It's reserved, state is to do. And then it's worth noting, I've done a longer demo on this, but you can build up a test system using the simulator to populate all of it'll create an admin network, and it'll create these 8 nodes, including the admin, so that you can exercise the system and run through the annealer. Technically, it's broken until I fix this error, which I'll probably do today. More questions?
Oh, that's good, Rob. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I'm pretty excited. It's because we've done so much actual deployment in bootstrapping. It makes me very confident that once we get nodes discovered with the OS installed, we're going to be able to go straight into putting workloads on, because effectively we're already doing that on the admin node. All right. Other questions? John, usually have one or two up your sleeve.
Not right now, Rob. I'm kind of a little distracted by a couple of things I need to get on and take care of.
Well, in that case,
I have been watching, and I can see the progress, and it looks great.
Thanks. I'm excited. I feel like we're just about there. I'm waiting for the node discovery pieces to come in. Actually, let me be specific. Nodes are discovered, they register, they give themselves IP address, they run OHI. We do a whole bunch of things. The next step is actually moving from discovering the nodes to installing the OS on them. And I'm looking forward to the demos of that in the next sprint reviews.
That'd be cool.
It's going to be awesome. It's
all right. I'm gonna drop off if you don't mind, and I will call you in probably about 20 minutes if that's okay.
I think that's fine, John. Just ping me first, and I'll tell you if I'm available. Talk to you later.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye.
All right, bye.
All right, everybody. Without further questions, I'm going to close the call.